Hi everyone! It is International Sex Workers' Rights Day, and so I wanted to share the fascinating history behind the very first sex workers' protest and march in American history, which happened right here in San Francisco 105 years ago in 1917. And it was co-led by two madams from the Uptown Tenderloin Vice District, Maud Spencer and M. Regina Gamble, aka Reggie Gamble. Now I have my cheat sheet here to the side, so you'll pardon the occasional glance away from the camera. But why and how did this protest come about in the first place? Well, an anti-vice campaign, largely led by a wealthy white man, had been gaining ground in San Francisco with the passage of the Red Light Abatement Act in 1913. This act essentially shut down several vice districts in the city of San Francisco, including the notorious Barbary Coast. Anti-vice organizers argued that women shouldn't be supporting an entire family. Their income should supplement the family income, which should be largely earned by the man of the house. They pushed for women sex workers to get legitimate jobs, say as a domestic or a laundress or secretary or a stenographer. Now, never mind that these so-called legitimate jobs typically capped out at about $6 per week for women. And, we might say, oh, well, surely in 1917, that was a decent chunk of cash. But in reality, it roughly equates to about $132 a week or $6,800 per year in today's money. So, needless to say, working class men were making considerably more. But what about sex workers? Well, the average sex worker in San Francisco in 1917 made $25 per week. And that was considered a slow week. And in today's money, that roughly translates to $549 per week or $28,500 per year. So facing such economic disparity, especially with children or out-of-work husbands and or parents to support, meant that many women turned to sex work simply to survive. But others still chose it as a valid economic choice. But come 1917, the city's elite began to wage a campaign to shut down the Uptown Tenderloin Vice District. And the figure at the forefront of this campaign was Reverend Paul Smith of the Central Methodist Church on O'Farrell and Leavenworth Streets in the Tenderloin. Now, as Smith preached against vice and sin, he garnered a following of thousands. And they planned to hold a mass meeting on the afternoon of January 25th, 1917, an event dubbed Purity Sunday, to decide how they were going to wipe out prostitution in the TL. But before the mass meeting, Smith received a phone call from one Mrs. M.R. Reggie Gamble. Gamble was a prominent figure in the Tenderloin sex worker community, and not just because she ran a successful business as the madam of a parlor house. She was savvy, intelligent, and most importantly, compassionate. She requested an audience with Smith in his church to discuss the problem of vice and how best to deal with it. And Smith agreed. But what unfolded on the morning of January 25th, 1917, was nothing less than what the Reverend would later call the most dramatic event of his entire life. So, if you'll give me a Sophia Petrillo moment, picture it. San Francisco, Sunday, January 25th, 1917. Now it's winter, but it's San Francisco, so it's a comfortable 55 to 60 degrees. There's a slight chill in the air. Reggie Gamble stands outside her parlor house on Mason Street, and she is joined by about 300 other women, all of them sex workers, each decked out in their very finest attire and their most expensive perfume. Those who have them don mink stoles and fur coats and hats trimmed with silk flowers and feathers. And Reggie Gamble takes the helm, leading the group down Mason Street. They turn west onto O'Farrell and head all the way to the Central Methodist Church on Leavenworth. They enter the church and they take up all the pews, literally rubbing elbows with the parishioners. It is the middle of the Sunday sermon. They have timed it perfectly. And as Reggie Gamble storms the pulpit, not waiting for permission from the dear Reverend, mind you, a hush falls over the crowd that not only includes the 300 protesters and the parishioners, but bystanders who have followed the protesters to the church, and reporters and photographers from every major newspaper in the city. People are pouring out the church door and into the street, and every single one waits to hear Reggie Gamble speak. These are her words. We women find it impossible to exist on the wages of $6 to $7 a week that are paid to women in San Francisco. Most of the girls here present came from the poor. Your sphere is among the well-to-do. These girls would be better off in houses of prostitution than they would be as individuals, because at least they get what little protection could be afforded them by the house. Nearly every one of these women is a mother or has somebody depending on her. They are driven into this life by economic conditions. People on the outside seem oblivious to this fact. One of the girls told me that her brother, a Methodist minister, when she applied for help to him, only told her to trust in God. You can't trust in God when shoes are $10 a pair and wages are $6 a week. I have the same respect for spiritual faith that anyone has. Which of the members of your congregation will take any of these women into their homes or pay them the proper living wage, or see that they have the care and attention that they need? You said that you didn't want women like this to come near your church. You want this section of the city to be free from their presence. Now, that is quite different from the attitude of the son of Mary toward the Magdalene. Jesus did not scorn the Magdalene as you have done. You want this city cleaned up around your church, but where do you want the women to go? Have you made any arrangements by which they can make their living elsewhere? There are women in your sphere of life who say to their sons that they must have their fling and sow their wild oats. If people in respectable walks of life had taught their sons to respect womanhood and not be content merely to be the mothers and fathers of young blood, many of these women now present would not be here. Why don't you go to the big business houses? Why don't you go to the legislature and change the conditions? Men here in San Francisco said they want to eradicate vice. Well, if they do, they better give up something of their dividends and pay the girls' wages so they can live. You won't do anything to stop vice by driving us women out of this city to some other city. Has your city and your church a different God that you drive evil away from your city and your church to other cities and other churches? If you want to stop prostitution, stop the new girls from coming in here. They're coming into it every day. They will always be coming into it as long as conditions, wages, and education are as they are. You don't do any good by attacking us. Why don't you attack those conditions? Thank you.